a man unexpectedly discovers that his body is constantly shrinking. His original 6'2" tall frame slowly shrank to less than 5'3". He was even quite a bit shorter than his wife. At first, Paul thought his body was just shrinking due to old age, and didn't think much of it, but as the days went by, his condition became more and more serious. He has now become even smaller than the family cat. The cat treats him as prey, chasing him all over the place all day long. For the sake of her husband's safety, his wife had no choice but to kick the cat out of the house. Soon, Paul's body became so small that he couldn't even climb onto the bed. His wife didn't dare sleep in the same bed with him either, terrified that she might accidentally roll over and crush him flat. With no other options, Paul had to move into his daughter's dollhouse. In the beginning, he actually thought this kind of life was pretty fun, completely unaware that he was about to face impending danger. The expelled cat sneaked back into the house through the cat flap. Startled, Paul lost his footing, and accidentally bumped into a fishhook. The smell of blood instantly activated the cat's hunting instincts. Paul quickly grabbed a sewing pin to use as a weapon, but this little thing couldn't cause any harm to the cat at all. To escape the cat's attack, Paul accidentally fell through a gap into the basement. He tried to call out to his wife for help, but his size was just too small, and she couldn't hear his voice at all. Seeing the cat appear inside the house, his wife immediately had a bad premonition.
C'est toi qui as fait ça?
She thought Paul had already been eaten by the cat, so she chased the cat back upstairs. Paul could only watch as his wife walked further and further away, which filled him with deep despair. He tore off a piece of rag and wrapped it around himself, surviving his first completely forgotten night amidst the dust and cold. The next morning, his daughter's shouting woke the sleeping Paul. Paul felt she might be the only one who could save him. He quickly ran to the bottom of the stairs, and yelled his daughter's name at the top of his lungs, but his voice was incredibly soft. In this massive space, it couldn't even produce a single echo. He noticed a piece of chalk lying on the ground, and immediately wrote his name by the stairs. But these letters, which looked huge to him, were, to normal humans, just an irregular scratch on the floor. To replenish his energy, Paul remembered that a month ago, he had placed a mousetrap in the corner of the basement. The cheese on the trap used to bait mice, became the only food he could find now. He lifted a nail on one side, and smashed it hard against the mousetrap's trigger. Fortunately, the trap's aftershock didn't hurt him. Just as Paul was taking big bites of the cheese, a huge spider behind him was slowly creeping towards him. Luckily, before the spider could launch its attack, Paul sensed the danger ahead of time. He waved his weapon to drive the spider away, and the spider, startled by Paul's sudden movement, turned and scuttled off. After experiencing this crisis, Paul realized that even tiny creatures he could normally crush with a single step could now threaten his life. He had to first find a hiding place to ensure his safety. He saw a large cardboard box not far away, so he used the iron nail to chisel a hole in the box. After squeezing inside, he used his tool to block the hole. In this tiny space, Paul could finally get a peaceful night's sleep. Time quickly passed, and over a dozen days went by, but during these days, neither his wife nor his daughter had come down to the basement. It seemed Paul had been completely forgotten by them. The intense fear he initially felt in his heart slowly faded away as well. He stopped thinking about tomorrow. When hungry, he looked around for something to eat. When tired, he lay down in the box to sleep. When in danger, he quickly ran away. When safe, he just sat on the ground waiting for time to pass. Every day, he only thought about things related to survival, and stopped pondering anything else. He walked over to his wine collection cabinet, used the iron nail to pry open a crack with great effort, and then drank the seeping red wine, trying to numb his brain, and avoid thinking about his current reality. Yet everything happening to him was being watched by that spider not far away. Paul also accidentally spotted this spider. Seeing that his body was still continuing to shrink, he knew that if he didn't get rid of the spider soon, once he became even smaller, he would never have a chance to fight back. He took that iron nail and walked towards the spider. Just as the spider was right in front of him, Paul accidentally slipped his hand, and the nail fell to the floor. Because he also lost his footing, he fell into the bathtub below. The next scene made Paul's entire body go numb. Little fishes only a couple of inches long were swimming right toward him. Fortunately, these goldfish had no intention of attacking him. They just swam back and forth around him. After Paul climbed out of the bathtub, he saw that the spider was hiding in a corner. He planned to trap the spider under a bottle cap, but unexpectedly, the spider was highly sensitive to its surroundings, and quickly spotted Paul. Seeing this, Paul could only put down the bottle cap, pick up his iron nail, and prepare to fight the spider. This time, Paul was determined to kill the spider, to eliminate any future threat. After the two sides battled for a few hours, Paul was backed into a corner. The spider, familiar with the environment, gained the upper hand in the fight. However, in the end, Paul managed to stab the spider in the eye with the iron nail, temporarily dodging this fatal disaster. To prevent the spider from coming back to attack him, Paul picked up a match, and set a small wad of scrap paper on fire. This blaze brought a bit of light to the dim basement, and also kept the spider from daring to approach him easily. Several more months passed. By this time, Paul had become even smaller than an ant. A step he used to climb with a gentle lift of his foot had now become as tall as a mountain. He couldn't possibly just step over it anymore. One day, he suddenly heard a burst of footsteps from upstairs. Just like before, he cried out loudly for help, hoping to attract the visitor's attention. But unexpectedly, the person who came was a real estate agent. Paul's voice was extremely faint, and it couldn't reach the ears of the agent who was busy on a phone call. Paul was even almost stepped on by this agent. Paul then realized that during the time he had been missing, even if his wife had been looking for him at first, since he had been gone for so many days, she must have concluded that he was eaten by the cat. To his wife, this house no longer served any purpose for her to keep living in. Looking at the goldfish in the nearby bathtub that had starved to death, Paul knew clearly that his final fate might be exactly like those goldfish, dying silently without a trace. Just when Paul felt hopeless about his future, a massive mosquito suddenly flew up from not far away. Watching the mosquito fly out through the window above, a thought popped into Paul's mind. As long as he escaped this basement, he still had a chance to survive. But Paul was only about a fifth of an inch tall, and trying to climb up to a window 10 feet high was incredibly difficult. But compared to just waiting to die in the basement, Paul would rather be on his way to the window and die in an accident. He began to climb up, using all his strength to inch his way up. For someone of his tiny size, successfully climbing to the ledge above would take at least 3 days. During these 3 days, he had no chance to rest, and no way to replenish his energy. But relying on his tenacious willpower, he finally, on the 4th day, successfully climbed onto the tabletop. After resting for a few hours, Paul decided to keep moving forward. But looking at the 1-inch wide crack in front of him, Paul knew that only by jumping across it could he make it to the distant window. After preparing himself for a few seconds, he charged toward the crack. He ran forward with all his might, and the moment he reached the edge of the crack, he leaped out. After successfully landing on the other side, Paul originally thought he could just leave the basement through the window. But before he could take more than a few steps, he saw a giant spider web blocking his path. On the web, a spider was waiting for its prey. Paul knew that forcing his way through meant certain death. He could only follow the weakest part of the web's edge, and carefully bypass it. He held his breath, and moved as slowly as possible. But a slight vibration still traveled along the spider's silk. The spider in the middle immediately sprang into action, and lunged toward Paul. Just at this critical moment, a mosquito suddenly crashed into the other side of the web. To the spider, this was a much more suitable meal. The next second, the spider turned around and pounced on the mosquito. Paul, having narrowly escaped disaster, didn't dare to linger, and quickly sped up his pace to move forward. He finally made it to the edge of the window, but even though his body had become smaller than an ant, the window screen's mesh was still too narrow for him now. Paul could only wait until his body shrank enough to fit through the mesh, so he could finally escape the basement. During the days of waiting, Paul looked up at the sky every day, feeling himself shrink little by little. He didn't know whether death or freedom would arrive first, but he had absolutely no choice in the matter. This particular morning, Paul was woken up by a wave of excruciating pain. He looked down, and saw an ant gnawing on his lower leg. Right after that, the spider also reappeared in front of Paul's eyes, and actually ate those ants. Seeing the spider lock its target on him again, Paul turned around and squeezed into the mesh of the window screen. Fortunately, his body had shrunk enough to slip through the mesh smoothly, allowing him to successfully dodge the spider's pursuit. Having successfully escaped outdoors, Paul looked out at a world that had completely changed its appearance. The originally unremarkable patches of green grass now looked like a boundless primeval forest in his eyes. He didn't know where his wife and daughter were, nor was he sure if he'd ever have the chance to reunite with his family. But he knew deep down in his heart that in the days to come, he would still have to face countless unknown and difficult challenges.